Are you a psychologist trying to determine whether or not you should form a sole proprietorship or a psychological corporation? In today's video, I am going to talk to you about the differences between a sole proprietorship and a psychological corporation here in California. Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm the managing attorney here at Mosque Act, where we help entrepreneurs just like you start your businesses without having to deal with the complicated legal forms. Our done-for-you service is backed by over 2,830 plus 5-star Google reviews, and we can help you start your business too. The purpose of these videos are to provide you with as much guidance and clarity in the beginning stages of starting a business. So if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like, subscribe, as well as the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. Prior to doing anything related to starting your own business, it's always recommended to speak with a professional. Now with that side note out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the differences between a sole proprietorship versus a psychological corporation when it comes to starting one's own private practice. I want to go ahead and begin by explaining the differences between a sole proprietorship and a psychological corporation. So what is a psychological sole proprietorship? A psychological sole proprietorship is a business entity which requires the psychologist to just apply for an EIN number. It's one of the easiest business structures to create. Again, all you need is an EIN number which one is able to obtain from the IRS. Once an individual obtains an EIN number, they're then able to open a business bank account. Now, the thing with opening and starting a sole proprietorship is your business will be attached personally to you. There is no separation between personal and business. And as a result, if any sort of liability were to arise, that individual, that psychologist, would be personally liable for that liability. Now let's go ahead and talk about what a psychological corporation is. A psychological corporation is another business entity here in California. Now it's very important to note that a psychologist looking to start some sort of business entity such as a corporation or an LLC is restricted from doing so. California passed an act called the Mosque Act, which requires professionally licensed psychologists to form what's called a professional corporation. In other words, the psychologist does not have the option to choose between an LLC and a general corporation. If they want that more structured business entity, then they must file a professional corporation here in California. The real difference between a sole proprietorship and a psychological corporation is the fact that a psychological corporation actually separates personal from business. And so with that further explanation, let's go ahead and talk about why psychologists choose to form one business entity over the other. Now, one of the main reasons why psychologists choose to form a sole proprietorship over a psychological corporation is because of, one, the ease of actually forming a sole proprietorship. As I discussed earlier, all an individual needs to do is apply for an EIN number from the IRS. Then, once an EIN number is automatically applied, basically once that psychologist starts engaging in business, they're automatically deemed to be a sole proprietorship. A second reason why a psychologist may choose to form a sole proprietorship over a professional corporation is because they're not really aware of a psychological corporation. Now, the two main reasons why a psychologist chooses to form a professional psychological corporation over a sole proprietorship is, one, the personal liability protection a psychological corporation offers. As discussed earlier, a psychological corporation actually separates personal from business. This means if any sort of liability were to arise in the course of business, the psychologist will not be liable for that liability. This means in the event of a potential lawsuit, a psychologist's personal bank account, personal home, personal car would potentially be protected. Basically, how this personal liability protection works is if a lawsuit were to be filed against a psychologist who has a registered psychological corporation, In that event, the psychologist's personal assets, such as their personal car, personal business account, personal house, would be protected, assuming all steps have been properly followed. And the second major reason why a psychologist chooses to form a psychological corporation is because of the credibility and authority a corporation has. When forming a psychological corporation gives the impression that the individual, the entrepreneur, is business savvy, that they have everything in order. And so credibility and authority are one major reason why psychological corporations are formed in the first place. Now, the question you're probably asking yourself is, which business entity is best for you? Well, it really depends on your situation and your self-preference. If personal liability is not that important to you, then you may want to look into forming and registering a sole proprietorship. However, if you do want to keep your personal assets safe, if you want to be able to separate any personal and business relationships, then forming a professional corporation may be the best option. If you happen to enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like, subscribe, as well as a bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. It's time to invest in yourself. It's time to rise.